Recording started.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody to this week's May Checks discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. And I'm not going to start right out with the name of this episode this evening. You'll see it when it goes up on YouTube. But I think as we progress through this, you're going to kind of comprehend what this scam is that I'm talking about. You could even go so far as to call it a conspiracy. I would definitely call it that because, as conspiracy is something that is created not just by one individual, but by multiple people. And what they're looking to do is maybe even not necessarily a crime, but they're looking to develop a means to an end. That there's a result that they want to see from what they're doing and something that they want to see occur. Even maybe Hegelian dialectic in that kind of form. But this scam, and like other scams, they're all kind of spread the same way. There's three main elements really to it that I've identified. And the way they're spread first is most often and most prominently inadvertently or accidental wise, you'd say. Maybe somebody has heard some discussion about something and they think it sounds really good. So they kind of jump on board with what little bit they found out and start promoting it. Or maybe it comes from a book or two that they've read, or several movies or documentaries or interviews they've seen, and so they start promoting this idea because on its face, it sounds really good. And all these things do. Every little deception that is presented to people, it's not presented to them in a way where they see the final outcome. It's presented to them in a way that sounds attractive. And it does implement some change, but these changes always start out as being incremental, little tiny things at a time. And before you know it, everything around you has changed. Uh, Reminds me of a statement that was made by Ronald Reagan in his first term in office. They were trying to push healthcare, statewide healthcare at that time as well. And he made the simple statement that, if you let that nose of the camel inside your tent, next thing you know, you're going to have the whole camel in your tent. And that's exactly the way these things work. They're incremental, little by little.
Yeah, little convenience here and there. Like I
Yep.
said earlier, people are taking convenience and making it a demand. And that's what gives the system control of that supply.
Yep. And the second way that these little scams are spread is by transfer. I would maybe point to like an MLM or multi-level marketing, where now instead of it just being a few individuals spreading some ideas and some seemingly good sounding ideas that they've heard, now there's actually groups of people that are formed. I'd love to say the name of one of them right now, but I'm not going to. People, I think, will be able to identify some of them on their own. But the second way, like I said, is by transfer. And so these ideas from these groups get transferred out to the public, or to the general public, rather. And it all sounds like all kind of kumbaya, all, we're out for the greater good, and we've got to think positive. Well, one of the things I mentioned to Keith just before we started the recording, one of the things that frustrates me that I've seen from people is that with a lot of the different things going on nowadays, you can see what their means to an end really is and how things could really result. And so many people are saying, oh, well, I make my own reality and things of that nature. Well, I'm sorry, you can make your own reality all you want, but if there's no food on the shelf tomorrow, it doesn't matter what kind of reality you've envisioned in your mind, there's still no food on the shelf tomorrow. This mantra of create your own reality, this was actually something that was hijacked. number three on how these things are spread, they're always spread with a purpose. Okay, and this purpose that there is behind it, people aren't going to see unless they really, really dig. These are at the deepest level of anything going on.
I was just speaking on that. I'm on a Zoom, and I was just speaking on that, how imperative is that we state our intent, because that's what allows them to pass on all these false certificates and stuff, because there's really no intent, and it's a presumption of their intent. And until we break that, it's going to continue. People are going to continue to take that convenience of not having to worry about what it's really saying, because that's not their intent. Their intent is to take the convenience.
Yeah, that's the way it's always pushed. It's as a convenience. Like I said, we're never going to see the real powers behind some of these movements that occur. They stay in the darkness. They stay cloaked. As awesome and wonderful as different things sound, most often, when you see things get spread really big and things that go mainstream, you have to know that the only reason why they've gone mainstream, the only reason why they've become so big, is because they've been allowed to become so big. If the powers that be did not want them in place, they would not be in place. Bottom line. It's the same thing with a lot of the big voices that you hear out there, whether it's David Icke or whatever the case may be. A lot of these people, they're in place for a reason. They're serving a purpose. And the purpose is not always, and in fact, almost never is, with the best intention. Like I said, this idea of, creating your own reality, or, raising your vibration and that kind of stuff. This was all just simply hijacked from movements from the 90s and 80s and even back to the 70s with Kenneth Copeland and people like Benny Hinn. At that time, this was called the Name It and Claim It movement within churchianity. This idea that, you could manifest whatever you wanted. And I'm sorry, I don't know too many followers of Kenneth Copeland that could compare with the amount of planes and houses and limousines that he owns today. To me, the only person in the Name It and Claim It movement that really profited off it were those that were espousing it, and the people like Kenneth Copeland or Benny Hinn. I remember here about 3 years ago, Benny Hinn even was saying that he was no longer going to be pushing this prosperity gospel that was being preached. And he was going to start going in a different direction with things. And he was almost apologizing regarding his spread of the prosperity gospel. But one of the things I kind of paid attention to, and he wasn't somebody that I listened to or anything, but the weeks after hearing him claim that, I would go back to his YouTube channel and look up all his old prosperity gospel sermons that he had. And guess what? They were all still up. He left them all there. As much as he said that, he kind of almost apologized for it, he still didn't take them down.
Yeah.
Because evidently they were still reaping some sort of prosperity for him, evidently. But that's what so many of these movements do, is you'll see them in different avenues, such as maybe in forms of religion. They'll be pushed a lot, and then secular society will start to pick them up and start pushing their own New Age movement. Oh, okay. I guess I said it, New Age movement. To me, the New Age movement is nothing more than a new cage movement.
Yeah.
And I'm going to definitely specify why it's actually a cage. I'll identify that in a few minutes.
I had a gal on the Zoom the other day, and she was trying to say the same concept and coming into the platform and urging everybody and trying to connect with everybody on private to have them join her organization type thing. And in doing so, she was pushing this thing that everybody needed to be afraid, and that one of the friends that she brought to the platform that had a problem needed to be addressed. She wanted my help. So when I asked her a question, she said, well, she doesn't comprehend your question, and da 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 da. And I cut her off right away. No, you're not going to come to this platform and push the agenda of fear mongering that other people aren't competent. I'm here trying to expose that people are competent, that they've been fooled, and that they just need to open their eyes and start learning. You are very qualified to enforce your power, and that's all it takes. And that's why the big movement part that you talk about, I'm not concerned with having so many followers and stuff. And though I do put a PayPal link out there, I'm not concerned with the financial end of it and that prosperity, because I always push first the word. And that is everything I post it from the public domain. That's where I get it. So it's already freely gathered, and I'm freely putting it out there. Now that you've been given notice and knowledge, now you have the same duty. Don't sit there and try to charge people for it.
Yeah, I'll notice that I'll post something very definite and specific on social media. And then in the comments, maybe the next day, I'll notice several people that ask questions. And why are they asking these questions? They're asking them because they read my post, right? Well, I'll notice that they'll ask some questions, and then after that, there will be about 5 or 6 other people that respond to them with about 10 different answers.
Yeah.
And I kind of find that interesting.
Yeah, you get a lot of the Patriot gurus in on some of those conversations.
Yeah, they all want to jump in.
Various gurus, SBC and UCC and all that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think one of the things that we need to do, and this is all part of, we say when we talk about even self-protection, for instance, if you're talking to somebody who's like training you on how to protect yourself when you're in crowds or something like that, one of the number one things that is always told to people is to be aware of your surroundings. Be very aware of your surroundings. And I think that today, in this day and age, there's no bigger thing that could be pushed other than that. We need to be aware of our surroundings. We need to see what's happening around us and what's going on, knowing that things occur for a purpose. Like I said, with these movements, things occur for a reason. There is an ultimate goal at the end. This isn't something that, it may be espoused as something that can help you now and make you feel better now and maybe more protected now, but they always have an end goal. And so that's what we have to pay attention to. And when we see these little changes happening, we have to pay attention to that. For instance, I know, that the vegetarian movement, it's been popular since, let's go back to the days of the hippies or whatever, late 60s, early 70s. And there's always been this trend toward a vegan diet for multiple reasons. Most of the reasons are, I would say, maybe social reasons, as far as a love of animals and things like that. They're very rarely ever for scriptural reasons. And if you want to find scriptural reasons for your diet, there's plenty of those that have been around for much, much longer than what vegetarianism has been around. But when you look at the vegetarian movement, I went online and looked to see the trends of it, and to see how it's risen and how strong it is. And it actually hit its peak in what year do you think? You'd probably guess what? 2020? That's exactly right. That's when the vegan movement has hit a peak, was in 2020. Don't think that just happens to be an accident. All of these things are planned. We know of certain people going up and buying large amount of farm property and farming real estate. There's a reason for it. There's many of these cattle farmers that are told to cull their herds. There is a reason for that. And this vegan movement or the vegetarian movement is just one of the many things. I mean, look at where we are today and what we're seeing today. There is talk of maybe different plants that are closing up or their manufacturing costs are going up for one reason or another. And we have to see that this is part of that whole push into veganism kind of starting to come to its head here. And we're now starting to maybe see the end results. I remember, about 3.5, 4 years ago, when I was at my doctor's, who I haven't been to now in 2 years, which is awesome. Um, but I was at my doctor's, and he had just moved into a new building, and he was now operating a private practice. And prior to him going into the private practice, I had noticed at the previous facility, they had talked about, if you have any problem with your files or accessing your records, please be patient with us because we are working on putting everybody's files, everybody's information into one central source. Because this is going to be so much better for you, because if you're traveling to another state and something happens, your information can be readily accessed. I've not really heard of people having a problem due to this in the past, but to me, I kind of saw that, and I saw that as a sign. There's something going on here. I noticed about that same time that all of a sudden there was masks freely given and available to you sitting on the counter at the desk at the doctor's office. Well, that was something new. Not long after that, there was also gloves available. Now we're talking almost a year, year and a half before any of these things ever start. We're talking like 3.5, 4 years ago now when these things started happening, because it started planting these things into the psyche and started planting these things into people's subconscious, to where then when it got promoted more in the future, it wouldn't seem all that odd. It wouldn't seem all that unusual, because this is an idea that had been presented to them already. I remember probably the number one grocery chain. It's actually a big box chain, but they had strictly a grocery near where I lived at. And I noticed in the back of the parking lot, they had tall chain link fence with a back area of the parking lot all blocked off. And so I kind of peeked in there one day. I wonder what's going on in here. And it was full of these POD, the pod storages that you haul in on a truck and sit down. It was full of those. This is really weird, and this is really strange. I mean, this isn't something you see at a store very often. I thought, I wonder if they're planning on doing some major remodeling or adding on or something along those lines. Well, it was about a month and a half later that Hurricane Irma came through. And after that had occurred, I mean, their shelves got wiped out. I don't know how many people live in, for instance, like hurricane areas, but those shelves can get stripped very, very quickly. However, about 3 days later, after the dust had all settled and the store reopened, their shelves were full again. And not only were their shelves full again, those pod storage units were all gone. I thought, wow, this is curious. It's almost like they knew the storm was coming. Go figure. Good old Sam Walton.
Yeah, it came right on time. There's
right on time. Yeah. And then it was probably a couple years after that I noticed that they were doing remodeling in the very front of the store. You walk into the store and you can take a right into the grocery area, take a left over to where the cashiers are at. But right behind that wall right there, they had everything closed off and they were remodeling everything in that area. And I thought, wow, this is like their number one high dollar value area of a store is right in the very front. The area that everybody sees when they first walk in, and typically the area that they're going to go past when they head to the cash registers. I thought, what a weird place to be kind of closing off part of your store. And why you wouldn't be putting an office area in this spot? Well, what would you be doing here? And it was about a month and a half after that that I remember walking into another, it's probably like the number 3 grocery chain in the USA. I remember pulling into their parking lot one evening about 9:30, and it was virtually empty. And I got out of the car, and one of their managers was getting carts out of the parking lot, which I thought kind of peculiar for a grocery manager to be doing. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." He says, we're closed." And I said, "Oh, really?" And this was at like 9:30 in the evening. I said, "Oh, I thought you were open till 10." He said, "Oh, no, actually, we're normally open till 11. But he said, we're closing early for cleaning." And I thought, oh boy, we definitely have something immediately on the horizon now. And I thought, why do you need to close an hour and a half for cleaning? Is this a type of cleaning that can only be done between 9:30 and 11, and not a type of cleaning that can be done between 11 and 12:30 at night? I mean, come on, this makes absolutely no sense, right? So what was really being done was a slowdown on commerce. It was closing down one of the biggest chains an hour and a half early in its workday. So I knew right then that there was definitely something on the horizon, something definitely coming up. And I remember the next morning, I was traveling south down towards Naples, and I just turned on the radio, which I normally don't listen to. I turned on the radio just to kind of see what was going on the news, things like that. And they had one of the media spokesmen for Disney on there, for Disney World on there. And he was saying that they were going to be closing down their facility up in Northeast Florida. They were going to be closing it up, until an unspecified time in the future for reasons of protection. And I was like, okay, yeah, protection. Protection for who? Because the only reason why you would shut down your business is to protect yourself, not to protect the public. And it was at that time, I immediately thought back to the day before at the grocery store. I thought back to different things I had seen at Sam Walton's store. And I was like, yeah, there's definitely something serious coming. And of course, that remodeling that was being done in the front of that other grocery store was to set up a facility for people to be able to call in and pick up their groceries. And that would be an area where workers would be going and putting things into boxes with whoever's name on it. And when they pulled into the parking lot in those preferred parking spots, somebody could wheel out their groceries to them. I guess because they're afraid to go in the store, not to mention that now instead of them picking something up off the shelf, who knows how many people have handled it and what all has happened with that product in between the shelf and the trunk of their car.
Well, and then to expand that farther is the people that order online and have it delivered home. And then when they get the products, well, we didn't have that exact product, so we substituted. So
Right.
you end up getting the products that you actually wanted, and you get these substitutes, and the substitutes, you never know, might have an ingredient in it that didn't, that the product you wanted didn't have in it, and that's why you ordered it, because you're allergic.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's all kinds of things people need to start being aware of in this supply chain stuff that we really need to pay attention to.
Yeah. And it's going to, and that our product might be $1 or $2 extra too. But at the same time, some of the things that I've noticed during this time, and things that are even continuing to go on today, and even some of them are getting a little bit more ramped up again. I don't know how many people have noticed this, But in the past, whenever I went to a store, never ever did they ask me if I wanted a bag for my items. Now you might have 2, 3, 4 items that you just purchased, and the clerk asks you, "Oh, do you want a bag for that?" And it's like you feel like you're a moron or something. What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Do I want a bag for it? No, I'm going to carry these 4 big items in my 2 hands, while at the same time juggling my car keys and trying to get to the. Come on. I just never seen that before. Never had that asked of me before. And we also know at the same time you start seeing these little notes next to the debit machines that say no change. No change provided. So if you're buying something for $14, you can't swipe your card and put in $15 and get $1 back, for instance. No, they weren't giving you any cash back. And at the same time, even limiting change to the point, I mean, when I say change, I'm talking about your quarters, nickels, dimes, pennies, to where if you purchase something that was, say, $4.75, and you gave them 5, they're not going to give you the quarter back. And they always round up in their favor, never in your favor. But they're even being reluctant to give back, even the silver change.
Yeah. Even that 1/10 of a cent on gas nationwide is an amazing amount.
Yeah, I've thought ever since I was a kid that was just hilarious. You'd be buying gas for X amount and 9/10 of a cent. It's like, really? I mean, but that's part of that incremental change that I'm talking about.
Incremental deception too.
Yeah.
Well, we're just going to round it up. No, you're not. And taxes don't apply. You're going to reduce it.
Exactly. But you look at some of these spiritual movements and things going on today, and the things that are espoused. Since I had already mentioned New Age movement, a lot of the push is for you to center yourself and to access your Christ consciousness within yourself, and that's what you should be focusing on. And that while you're meditating, this time of meditation is about going inward and about being more connected and about raising your vibration. And speaking about vibration and frequency, even if you look at the situation with veganism, this is one of the things I'm surprised that really isn't pushed very much, is that you're going to lower your vibration, for instance, with like eating red meat. You're going to take it down 80, 90 points easily, which that doesn't happen, with eating vegetables or a plant-based diet. So everything is about frequency.
Well, and I just did a video not too long ago about Jacob's ladder, and it's my firm belief that if you really want to get into harmony with that frequency, you got to learn about that Jacob's ladder, so that you can communicate Jacob and Israel, as it says in Isaiah 44 verse 5. One shall say, "I am the Lord's." Another shall call himself by the name Jacob, and another shall subscribe by his hand in the surname of Israel. And when we realize the fluctuation of going back and forth, realizing the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of Israel are the same, and that's where we need to follow the spirit of Israel through the name of Jacob, because we are the Lord's. If we don't accept that, then we can't find that harmonic resonance to frequent. And that's what the frequency is about, keeping it in line and always walking in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, Son, and Father, up and down the chain.
And belonging to Christ is actually exactly where this all really it comes from. It's really what it's all about. That with the New Age movement, like I say, trying to push you into, centering in with your Christ consciousness and raising your frequency, raising your vibration, being in tune with the Christ consciousness. When you look at this, just stand back and look at the situation. And I'm sure I can hear people yelling and screaming now, but this is nothing but mere selfishness.
Yep.
Plain and simple, it's pure selfishness. Because if you want to know about the Christ consciousness and what it all really means, well, why not just go back to Christ? Why not go back to Yeshua and see what he said? What is the most important thing? Of all the commandments, he said, the greatest of these is that you love your brother as yourself. Now, is this talking about the greatest commandment is you go inside yourself? No, the greatest commandment is you go outside yourself. That's
Yep.
what the great work really is. You should be going and looking for that Christ consciousness in your brother and sister and raising them up.
Right.
And through raising them up will raise you up.
Right. A resurrection in that merger of you and them. And that's that resonant frequency extending in different directions rather than just within yourself, like we just talked about, and bringing them into that same consciousness of that walking in the way as the Holy Spirit.
Well, and an end result what happens to you subconsciously when you're spending so much time going inside yourself, and what people are naturally going to be doing is they're looking for the good within themselves, and they're trying to raise that up. They're trying to make that become more of who they are, and all of that sounds very good and everything. Sounds awesome. But what you're doing when you're doing that subconsciously, you are also keeping yourself aware of the negative.
Yep.
And when you're keeping yourself aware of the negative, what does that mean? That means that now when you look at your brother and sister, instead of looking for the Christ or the good within them and raising that up, now what you're doing instead is you're looking for what's wrong. You're looking for the negative about them. And in fact, people will even point that out immediately because that's what they're always, focused in on for some reason now is the bad. Oh, I need to help you. You've got some things that you need to work on, some things that you need to fix. The Spirit spoke to me and told me I need to help you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I pour myself out to an extended period or extended place where my spout isn't going to reach. It's like you said earlier, walk up under or I guess it was somebody else, be the basket that might not have enough, and recognizing that, and go to the baskets that are overflowing and are willing to give that freely, but as long as it's you listening to them. I'm not here to pour my graciousness out and extend it any farther than I can reach. And that's the concurrence of love thy neighbor as thyself. Owe no man anything but to love them. For to love one another is the fulfillment of the law. So that's again concurring that's why the ulterior motive is to love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the true merger to fulfill the law.
Correct. And so we need to watch these things that are really taking hold in the community around us and the direction that people are moving into. And with these secular ideas, even though a lot of these secular ideas may sound really warm and fuzzy and everything, there's an end goal, and the end goal is not that warm and fuzzy. It is not that good of a thing. I've looked the past few years at the movement for, say, 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and thought, isn't it interesting that people will actually pay to give away their biological property? And what are they gonna get back? But who knows what kind of end result it's going to come back with? I have people come and say to me, "Oh, well, you don't know how many people have been reunited with their families." And yeah, I know how many have been reunited with their families. None, zero, because that's not the way freaking Ancestry.com or 23andMe works. Just go and read their websites. They give you a general idea of, 23% of you might be from South America, 46% of you might be from Europe. Yeah, they're not specifying a particular family. Or, Lord forbid, I know everybody probably wants to find out that they belong to a royal bloodline or something like that.
Or
Sorry.
12 tribes that they're supposed to be
Yeah,
considering.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, so you have to stop and think, what are those people up to? What are they really going after? Because nothing that is done is ever done for one basic result. Everything that is ever done has been done to seek multiple results, 2, 3, 4 different results. And if a couple other good ones, unintended, happen along the way, then awesome. But they always have a handful of goals in mind. And the one goal in mind is not just to help you find your family or find your family tree. There's going to be multiple things that they want. And it's so easy to ply the human mind. I guess using the word ply is almost kind of a pun here, because what do they have to do to make the shelves run empty of toilet paper? They just have to say, hey, we think there may be a scarcity of toilet paper. And within 2 days, the shelves are empty. Go figure.
Well, it's like I mentioned earlier too, the supply and demand and the way they market things. They're putting it out there that eggs will soon be $13 a dozen. So that's bringing to the face of the documentation and the belief that people are going to end up paying $13 a dozen. Therefore, they're preparing to pay $13 a dozen, or restrict themselves, or find a way to produce them eggs themselves. It's a place where they're forcing people. But again, let those that be fooled be fooled. Then I guarantee you, we're going to see a lot of people willing to pay $13 an egg or $13 a dozen for eggs, because they either don't have any other way, are refusing to do it any other way, or are not accepting that they do have a way to do it another way. And that's just pure stupidity.
Well, and that's the number one thing they use, really, is putting it in your subconscious. And I think this crowd here that's listening is very familiar with the things that have been done subliminally over music or television. And that way, when something does occur, it's not quite as much of a shock to the psyche, because the psyche already accepted this as a fact. And, like putting that idea of $13 a dozen for eggs in the back of your mind. That way, in 8 months, when it does occur, you don't remember quite where, but somewhere you heard that this was going to happen. And so it's not quite as much of a shock to you anymore. And you're more willing to go along with the whole situation than, really stand up and say, hey, what's happening here? What's really going on? And I think that anyone who lives in areas or knows people who are maybe involved in certain industries, that they need to, kind of rattle the chains with some of these people and say, listen, you're going to speak up. Are you going to take a stand? You're going to let people know what's really going on now? Because, the masses as a whole are too easily fooled and too easily manipulated. Those people that are at the front lines should really be doing something. I mean, these are an example of the watchman on the wall. And if the watchman on the wall does not sound his horn, then the blood of the people are on his hands.
Yep. And that's
just the way it works.
That's in the scripture. And that's I like that you made that point, because Isaiah 54 tells us how to be that watchman. The barren mothers and the children of the barren mothers, there are more children that are desolate, and we're supposed to be singing his righteous word upon anyone that would place judgment or try to prosper from those people. We're supposed to rise up in judgment against any tongue that would prosper. This tells us we're supposed to know those tongues so we can sing out against them. And this is why I use the scripture, and it correlates to all those different jurisdictions that use those different tongues. and it's uniform throughout the jurisdictions. So when I find things in those different jurisdictions, I counsel in our Father which art in heaven through the scriptures, which are my holy writs, and that shows me how to correlate the scripture to what they wrote. They mirrored it. This is saying the same thing, just using different words. And their words cannot be placed as sanctions through their ordinances for my acts of God as being sanctified and ordained a prophet unto the nations. So you just flip it all around on them. And
Absolutely.
They have to accept it.
Absolutely. And that's what a prophet unto the nations is supposed to do. You know, I have gotten to the point past several months where I'm not really too concerned about the Sunday night call because I know that when the time comes, sometimes it's an hour ahead of time or 2 hours ahead of time. Many times it was like today. It was like this morning I woke up and I knew exactly what needed to be talked about because people are going to too easily be tricked into seeing things that look good when at the end it's actually bad for them. You know, that which was made for your benefit has become a snare. And that's the exact scenario people are going to easily find themselves in if they don't keep their eyes open and their ears open, their hearts open to what's really happening and what's really behind some of the movements that come along that they are too easily persuaded to moving into. So,
yeah, and I think that's because so many people are willing to listen to that written word that shows some kind of effect, and that doesn't quantify that intent. And so if there's no intent, that effect is now standardized. And so everybody's walking around with no logical reason of intent. So I think we need to, like you said, go back to the intent and standardize that so we can reach the effect of that intent.
that written word, it's nothing more than a drug. You know, it's been it's been coined also. I think Napoleon said the opiate of the masses. Well, you know what? That written word that people are so dependent on, they don't realize that just like a drug, you know, it's been stepped on by gosh knows how many people along the way and morphed into something else, and now is full of who knows what other ingredients that you can find underneath, you know, the dish room sink. You know what I mean? It's not as pure as what it started out to be. It's been morphed and changed so many times. The word that you're supposed to be paying attention to is that word that's written on your heart. Bottom line.
Yeah, well, and that's why that written script, when they place those nouns and adjectives and verbs on there, and you read that, and you ask what they're talking about. When it's written in your heart, there is no what, because you already know it's not placed on paper as a descriptive element. It's the real thing, and that is a verb, an act of God. And that doesn't need to be defined. It just is. It's patently observable.
And, you know, just like I went over last week, you know, in mentioning that when I was younger and going and reading the second chapter of Genesis, and for some reason, things just didn't quite sit well with me. It's something just didn't seem quite right. And even going through the Old Testament, and there's so many different things that you see there and read there that just, it's like, you know, no, I don't think this is exactly what's intended. I don't think the creator is supposed to be telling you how to sell your daughter into prostitution. I mean, and that was probably why so many pastors don't touch Genesis that much, why they don't touch the Old Testament that much, because at the same time, they know something doesn't quite feel right either. But if they really explore why it doesn't feel right, they're going to quickly find that it's a message that their population of their church would not gladly accept because it's something very different than what they grew up with in Sunday school. And
well, not only that, but I think the source of that, finding out what that second Genesis 2 is talking about, and the confusion is that they took out the book of Thomas, which was Jesus speaking in parables. And if you want to know the true answers, you have to learn how to comprehend those parables. That's where you get the word of Jesus that correlates with the rest of the Bible. Another one I suggest is the Book of Enoch. Book of Enoch and Book of Thomas. And you might get a better clarification what the actual 1611 King James Version of the Bible is by being able to interpret them through a parable sense and then compare them to the church's Pharisees and Jewish writings of how they interpreted them. The Book of Thomas is the word of Jesus, and that's up for your interpretation. This is why I talk about the Vatican and the Pope making that first papal bull claiming the souls of all men, when in the scripture it says, one shall say, I am the Lord's. And it is the Lord that redeems the soul. And it is only the one that seeks redemption. He has to seek redemption of our Father which are in heaven through Jesus, and not the Pope and the Vatican.
All right. Well, and that's the issue, is that with all of these little things, with all of these little scams or conspiracies that come along, whether it's a new age or who it is that's bringing forth things, what a lot of it is really going to come down to is one individual wanting to be the vicar, one individual wanting to be the one you go to and you listen to, and that's where you go for your teachings at. And instead of going directly to source, which is what you should really be doing.
Yeah, instead of seeking the vicar's advice and everything and how they interpret the Bible, he gives us an immutable promise to seek his counsel. Why are we seeking his counsel through these vicars and stuff that aren't following Christ, but giving us their interpretation instead of telling us, well, according to our view, we really need to include that Book of Thomas, as well as the Book of Enoch, because under the Book of Enoch, you'll find that it tells us we're not supposed to be writing. So what are these vicars and popes and everything doing writing if they're professing to be teachers of that knowledge? That writing is a distraction of that knowledge, and that's why they took those books out.
Well, let's look at the bottom line, though, Keith. Keith, the bottom line really is that people want to control what is important to you, because it's easily known, that it doesn't take a rocket scientist for people to know that whatever is important to you is where your money gets spent at. Bottom line. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks, Keith.
Yes, God bless everybody. If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. We'll see you back on Zoom if you're still around. Bye.
Catch you guys. Good night. Until next Sunday. Have an excellent week, and keep these things in mind. Thank you.